Hey guys, welcome back to Fix It Friday. So this week we're going to be talking about Microsoft's very first console, the original Xbox. So this is a really awesome console to have if you don't already. Aside from having a really nice library of games, it's also a powerhouse for homebrew and emulation. And so you can emulate lots of retro consoles and arcade games on this thing. And so for that reason, it's really awesome to have. So as of right now, until very recently, the best kind of video signal you could get out of an original Xbox was to use an HD AV pack, which is a adapter that gives you component video out from the Xbox. And that's really nice, but now there are options to get a pure digital video signal out of the Xbox and send it directly to your flat panel display. And so that's what I'm holding right here. This is the MakeMhz Xbox HDMI mod kit. And so yeah, it comes with just a few components really. So you've got your board here, a flat flex cable, and then some 3D printed mounting parts to put this in place. So today what we're going to do is we're going to take apart this Xbox, install this MakeMhz HDMI kit, and then see how it performs. Alright, let's get started. Alright, so to disassemble an Xbox, you need a few different drill bits which you may or may not have in your collection. You're going to need a Torx 20 screwdriver bit, and that's like a hex kind of shaped bit. And you're also going to need a Torx 15 drill bit as well. I really wish they had just used regular screws. I have no idea why they decided to do this, but so be it. So to take apart the Xbox, you've got 6 of those Torx 20 screws on the back. 4 of them are under the feet, and then there's 2 over here as well underneath these labels. It's better if you don't pull off the feet entirely because you might lose that stickiness. It's like better just to pull it like a little bit halfway and then remove the screws. So they're right here at the tips of the feet. And then once you pull that off, then you can just lift the entire top shell off. You can see this is an Xbox that has already been modified. So instead of having a standard 8GB drive, it has a 2TB drive installed, and it also has an 80-pin IDE cable instead of the standard 40-pin IDE cable. But none of this is mandatory for the mod. You can do this on a completely stock Xbox, and it's totally fine. So from here, we've got 3 Torx screws to remove. There's one over here, there's one right over here, and then the third one is hiding underneath this 80-pin IDE cable right here. So I'm going to go ahead and remove those, and then that will allow me to get the drives out of the way. Okay, so we've got the hard drive out of the way and the disk drive out of the way, and now you can see the motherboard and the power supply. So this version of the motherboard is an Xbox 1.2. And so as of the time of making this video, there's only a handful of motherboard revisions that are fully supported. So you can use a 1.2, a 1.3, or a 1.4 without any issues. As of right now, the 1.6 kit isn't yet public. I think it's something that is being made and will be sold soon, but it's not yet ready. And if you have a 1.0 or 1.1 Xbox, this will work, but you do need a daughter board to go along with it. And as of right now, that daughter board has not been made. So really, if you're trying to do this and you're looking for a specific Xbox, the easiest thing to do is to grab a 1.2, 1.3, or a 1.4. Okay, so as you can see, I've done a little bit of modification to this Xbox already. So it has an Open Xenium mod chip. This is not mandatory for the Xbox HDMI, but it does make things a lot easier. Apparently you can adjust settings if you've got this mod chip. But either way, it's really nice to get one of these anyway, because one issue with all Xboxes is that they have a clock chip, which, a clock capacitor right here, which is used to keep the time. And pretty much every single one of these has gone bad or will go bad soon. So if you haven't, it's something that you should at the very least consider replacing, or you can just get rid of it altogether and replace it with either a mod chip like I've done here, or you can do something called a TSOP mod, which also bypasses the need for a clock cap. Those are things that are outside of the scope of this video, but since I've got the thing open, I just figured I'd talk about it a little bit. So anyhow, once you've got down to this point, then you've got to remove more Torx screws. You can see the locations where they normally are. So all of these little areas with these like little metal halos around them is a position where there is a Torx screw. And then there's also two over here where the AV connector is located as well. So I've already gone ahead and removed that. So now I'm just going to take the motherboard out and we're going to get started with the mod. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to do is get these heat sinks out of the way because the mod is going to be situated right over here. And it's just kind of annoying to work on it with this stuff in the way. So to take these off, you got to do a couple things. First thing is if you come in with like a flat tip screwdriver and you just kind of push at this retainer clip like so, you'll be able to take it out. And I'm going to do the same thing for the CPU as well. Alright, so now that those plastic bits are out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and get a heat gun, warm this up, and then if you twist while they're warm, you should be able to remove them safely. Okay, so I've got the heat gun warmed up to about 100 degrees Celsius. So not that hot. Normally I have this gun running much, much hotter than that because I'm trying to remove components. So yeah, I'm just going to work it on these heat sinks a little bit just to warm them up. And then I'll try twisting them off and we'll hopefully get them off. Okay, that wasn't so bad at all. Alright, so the next step is to take the AV port and desolder it. And this is important because the HDMI mod is going to be situated right here. So the way that I'm going to do it today is I'm going to be using some ChipQuick. This stuff is awesome. I've used it many times in the past on the channel. It's extremely nice and easy to use and inexpensive, relatively speaking. So to use ChipQuick, you start with taking some flux, this special ChipQuick flux that comes with the kit, and then you add it to all the places where you need to desolder. And so I'm doing that to the best of my ability right there. The next thing you do is you take the low melt solder ChipQuick and you're going to try to hit it onto every point that you're going to be removing. So I'm going to use a pretty liberal amount, excessive amount of ChipQuick here because I am not concerned with bridging points. I'm just trying to cover this whole area so that I can remove this thing more efficiently. And you can see this stuff really doesn't want to harden up. It stays liquid for quite some time. Alright, so pretty much everything now is covered in ChipQuick, which is good. You'll notice I have taken a small piece of Kapton tape and I've covered this region. And the reason why I've done that is because I'm going to be using a hot air gun and I'm going to be hitting this whole area and trying to melt all of these points with the hot air gun. And then at the same time, I'm going to be using like a pair of pliers or something to pull the AV port off. But you've got to be really careful because I'm using hot air and I could easily melt the solder on some of these surface mount components and then they might move. And I really don't want to do that. That would be a real headache to try to fix. So, so the Kapton tape is heat resistant and it protects this area from the heat. So now that that's all ready to go, I've got my hot air gun again. And I've got it set to about 300 Celsius. And I'm just going to work the area until all the solder melts. And once I think I'm ready, I'm going to go ahead and pull with my pair of pliers here. Or I'm sorry, my my screwdriver. Let's see if that'll do the trick. Okay, so now that the port has been removed, the next thing I'm going to do is just take some solder braid and I'm going to clear this whole area out so that all of these vias are open. Okay, so I've got most of everything cleaned up and ready to go. So the next thing that we've got to do is we actually have to solder together a few points on where the AV connector used to be. So specifically, we've got to solder these 2 points together, and we've got to solder these 2 points together. The reason why is that when an HD AV pack is inserted, those particular places are bridged together. So we basically need to trick the Xbox into thinking that an HD AV pack has been inserted into the multi-out connector over here. So I'm going to go ahead with this really fine Kynar wire, and I'm just going to bridge these points together, and then just cut off the excess, and then just do the second one. Okay, so now it's time for the big moment in this mod, which is to install the flex cable. This is a pretty cool design for a flex cable, so you can see that it actually goes on 3 points on the video encoder. So it's the same regardless if your video encoder says connexent, like you can see this one says connexent, and there's another one that says focus. Those are both the same in terms of pinout, so you don't have to worry about that. But basically what I'm going to do is, because it's kind of a strange design, I am going to start with this side because I know that this particular side is aligned with the edge. So that makes it kind of easier to install than the other two sides. So I'm going to start there. And then I'll work my way over to this side here because there's a large number of connections, and then finally I'll complete with this side over here. And as far as methods go, what I suggest is that you should definitely have some kind of magnification if you're planning on doing this, because it's small. It's not as hard as, say, a PS1 digital, but it's definitely small, and it's much easier to have a microscope and verify your work than to just hope for the best. So right now I've got this fairly well lined up. I'm going to leave it with my finger, although I also recommend having a set of forceps for something like this. And right now the first thing I'm going to do is just try to get these things tacked into position without worrying about how clean or precise anything is, because I'll always come back and fix that up later. Okay, so that guy's tacked in. And again, I'm not worried about perfection right now. This guy seems fairly well lined up as well. I'm just going to double check that. That that's correct, I believe so. And again, I'm just trying to get it locked in. Okay. They're reasonably locked in now. So I'm going to start with this one because it has the most connections to worry about. I'm going to use my forceps to hold everything down. Make sure that it's right. Oops, sorry about that. I definitely have a bridge on at least 2 pins, but again, I'm not worried about that. I'll go under the microscope and correct that. That's also true here. I absolutely have a bridge, but again, I'm not worried. Okay, so I took this under the microscope and I finished it up, and now everything is all set. So I can tell you I did have a bridge on this side and on this side, and I wouldn't have really seen that properly without the microscope. So again, you really need one for this kind of work. Everything else went fine. The only thing I wanted to add is that in terms of soldering this piece here, there's actually a little bit of a marking on the board that helps. So there's like a little white line on the solder mask right over here, and that is right on the border of where this thing is supposed to go. So if you use that as your guide for where the bottom of this is, you can more easily align it, and that really helps, because I mean really it's only 3 points, so it's not really a lot to solder on this side. Alright, so now that this is all finished, I just have a few places to solder onto the board, just some additional wires, so I'm going to go ahead and do that right now, and then we'll wrap this thing up. Okay, so I've gone ahead and soldered all of the final wires onto the motherboard, so I just wanted to show you guys right now. And we're going to just do those final connections. So this guy here, this is our 5-volt line. This is our SPDIF audio, so our digital audio. This is a ground. This is called 1V8 in the installation docks. This is another ground. And then down here, we also have to solder to the 2 final pins on this particular chip. And so those are referred to as SCL or SDA. And those are all going to go to the board. And the board is basically going to sit like right about here. There's also one final thing to remove as well. There's like a little ferrite bead right here. It looks almost like a capacitor or something like that, but apparently it's not. It's a ferrite bead right over here. So I'm going to need to desolder that, and actually I'm going to have to take this ground off first and then do that. So let me go ahead and do that, and then we're going to go ahead and do all the final connections to the board. So now I'm just going to clean up this area with some braid. Okay. So now I'll put this ground back into place. There we go. That should be fine. And now let's go ahead and install that board. This little spacer basically sits here. And it's going to be screwed into place on the motherboard, but you know, for now I'm going to use it just for support. And it's basically going to sit like this. Okay, so now that the motherboard's in place, I'm just going to take these hex screws that are provided with the kit and just get them locked into position where they belong. Okay, I think that's it. So we are basically good to go. I'm going to go ahead and repaste the GPU and CPU and finish reassembling everything, and we'll give this thing a quick test. Alright, so as you can see, I've reassembled the Xbox and everything is working perfectly now. That being said, when I first tested this system out, I thought that there was a problem, but it turns out that I had made a mistake, and so I wanted to make sure that you guys know about this if you're attempting this installation as well. So when I first powered on the Xbox, I had all sorts of weird like rolling and image stability problems, basically. And then I would get into the main menu of my modified Xbox and everything looked perfect, just like how you're seeing here. And so I didn't quite understand what the issue was. And then I tried playing games and those were also a mess. And then what I eventually realized is that I had my video settings all wrong. And so what I discovered is that I needed to enable 480p, 720p, and 1080i. So once I enabled all of those modes, everything has been working perfectly ever since. So I recommend to you, if you're doing this install, before you even do it, make sure these alternative video modes are enabled before you install anything. Because at first I thought, okay, maybe there's a problem with the clock, or maybe there's a problem with the horizontal or vertical sync. So I checked those solder points, I measured continuity, everything was fine. But then I thought about it and I realized that there's these video modes and maybe they're not turned on, and as it turns out they weren't. So long story short, make sure these are turned on. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and show you guys some gameplay. Alright, so here's Halo 2 in the start sequence, and Hopefully this is coming out clearly on camera, but it looks really, really good. So everything is nice and sharp and crisp. It's going to be output in the native resolution that the game was capable of. So in this case, 480p, and most of the Xbox games are going to be in 480p. But as long as you have a decent television, like either a 1080p television or a 4K, then it'll upscale that accordingly, and it'll look really amazing. So yeah, I definitely recommend this mod. I think there's definitely some kinks that need to be worked out because, not all of the motherboard revisions are compatible and things are not yet fully available. But, once those things come out, I think that this thing has a lot of promise and potential. And I can at least say that for me, the installation was pretty comparable to doing like a DC Digital. It's not that bad. Alright, so if you guys like this content, then definitely consider subscribing to the channel. I have videos on repairs and mods every Friday. And let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. And thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.